And, of course, we're going to talk sports, too, aren't we?
Yeah, it is time to talk a little sports, and there's no pig roundup going on, but there is some wonderful things happening otherwise. It's time for Inside the Game with Steve Clarke. Good morning, Steve. Can't wait to talk sports with you. There's a whole lot going on, including a big decision that just came down in the courts that's going to affect college football going forward.
Yes, good morning, Dave. Good morning, Ron, and good morning, Pat. Can you hear me through all the Canadian smoke?
Yes. Yeah, you sound like you're a little muffled, Steve, but that's good.
So much smoke, we can't even hear one another. Look, Dave, you're absolutely right. Friday night, finally, Judge Claudia Wilkin, who is, the judge looking over the House settlement lawsuit that was supposed to be sort of agreed upon months ago, was finally validated and accepted. And this allows for the very first time NCAA universities to pay student athletes in general for their play on the field, and allow them also to be able to receive compensation legally through name, image, and likeness. It's a very, very complicated issue, but we're going to be hearing more about it as the months go on, some of the pros and some of the cons. And I think most people want to know is, how does this change my football and basketball at prestigious universities like the University of Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State?
Yeah.
How does this change everything? And one of the things I think you can kind of safely guarantee, that really no matter what happens that's going on, Michigan and Ohio State will always be stalwarts and be able to move and accept and transition to whatever the sports environment's going to be.
It does kind of pull back a little bit on the Wild Wild West, but not a lot, right? I mean, now the schools are paying, but how does that affect NIL money?
So one of the things is that it allows directly to pay student athletes up to $20.5 million. Now think of that as sort of a cap.
Wow.
Right. Taking the revenues that are coming in, the expected TV contracts, and they kind of come up with this figure that each year is amendable. It could go up or it can go down. You guys are all smart. You know what's going to happen. That number is actually going to go up.
Yeah,
but there's been some there's been some unintended consequences throughout all of this, and that includes the roster limits that were put on all the varsity sports that have gone on. And what's happened is that we've realized that in some of these non-revenue varsity sports, think golf, think tennis, track and field, cross country, things like that, that they had big rosters on that, even though that most of those student athletes weren't being paid very much at all through the Alston decision. That's getting very complicated, but they were getting a little bit of something, and it was very legal. But this House settlement changed the sizes of the roster limits to the point where they can't have these so-called walk-ons or non-scholarship athletes in their program anymore. And that's been really, really deflating for very talented high school athletes to all of a sudden be shown the door. And those that were actually being a walk on the team, through their junior years, are being shown the door because of roster size limits. Scholarships were able to increase, and that's what everybody looked at as a positive thing. But what they didn't realize, and again, I call this unintended consequences, was the roster sizes that went down, effectively shutting people out that once were benefiting.
Yeah, and if you don't like the rules, wait 10 minutes because it's going to change.
That's about right, yeah.
The NCAA is out of it, right? There's a new governing body that's overseeing all this, and you have to say, in some ways, that's a good thing.
Remember Deloitte and Touche? Those were the guys who, when they did the Academy Awards and the Emmys, how was this compilated? Well, by the lawyers of Deloitte and Touche.
Yeah, right.
There's no Touche anymore. It's just Deloitte.
Just one guy.
And what Deloitte is doing is it is crazy, Dave. It's just one of those things I just roll my eyes and just don't see how this happens, is that the NIL deals that are being made by organizations and companies that are flagship banners for a particular university come up with a dollar figure and a deal of light work or charity work and decide to pay them a compensation package. Now, if I decided to make an appearance at Annunciation Radio's morning offering, also heard on Ave Maria Radio, I will maybe get $5 for my appearance. If I'm a student athlete, I could make $1 million for each appearance. And what the Deloitte company is deciding is what is a real reasonable NIL package and what's unreasonable. And the thing is, to have a committee decide what's reasonable and unreasonable and what's fair market value is always going to be determined in the courts when somebody doesn't like a decision being handed down. So if Deloitte says this NIL deal is legal and this one is not, the ones that are going to go by the wayside are going to sue to say, how could you say this is not fair market value? I'm willing to pay for it. Therefore, it is fair market value.
Yeah, and there's no benchmark that you can't really compare to anything. Well, there's no precedent.
That's Ron, that's very astute. So there's a number of things that have to work out. I think in general, now that you have the House settlement ratified, this now opens the door for a whole bunch of other lawsuits to come. And the only thing that the only people that are making more money than student athletes right now are the lawyers.
Yeah, right.
Those are the ones that will be making the most amount of money.
Is there any truth to the fact that Leo XIV has offered to mediate this as long as it's to the benefit of Villanova?
Here's the thing. Any type of mediation done by the Pope or anybody else is just going to be fueled by people who won't like any decision that's being made.
Right.
Just as an example, you could have a very, very interesting lawsuit where it comes down to minorities feeling they're not getting the money that they deserve because they're minorities, going up against a group of women who have felt they have not been given what they deserve to be given. And so you might have a Title IX versus minority lawsuit impacting, and who wins on that?
Right.
The answer is nobody really wins on it, but it is two strong things that people can both believe in and get their hands, attached to, might be pitting against one another, and it just doesn't seem right.
Well, and obviously, and you pointed it out before, you have the revenue producing sports, and you have those sports that don't produce any or very little revenue to cover this. There has to be some equality of payment based on the fact that those two things, as you said, are going to argue against one another if there isn't some equality in payment.
Well, so if you're going to make everything equal, are you not impacting those that are actually the ones probably responsible for the most money being generated? That's football and basketball. And that's where you get in an argument of minority compensation not living up to what it should be, going up against Title IX issues. And I can tell the music is coming up. There's so much to talk about over the next couple of weeks, next couple of years over this.
And we celebrate
2 minutes just to that.
Yeah, that's right. You celebrate baseball. The Tigers keep winning, and the Indians or the Guardians, they still occasionally win. They won just yesterday, so that's good news. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we didn't even have time to talk pickleball. I mean, my goodness.
I know.
What kind of sports segment is this when we don't even talk pickleball?
Yeah, I just remember when going to college was about getting an education.
Oh, yeah, you remember that, Pat?
I don't remember
As a college
that.
professor,
Yeah.
that
Good
might
memory.
be the important part to point out here.
Kind of
And
like that time, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to have been lost in the mix.
We'll be right
It
back.
has.